a dream and déjà vu, logic and magic, coincidence and connection. One moment, you're just going about your normal day, and the next, it feels like reality winks at you. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and boom, they text you. You're struggling with a big question, and the answer floats by in a song lyric, a street sign, or some random line in a book you weren't even planning to read. It doesn't feel random. It feels choreographed. This is the strange territory Carl Jung called synchronicity. Not just coincidence, but meaningful coincidence. The kind that makes you pause, raise an eyebrow and whisper, "Okay, what was that?" For Jung, these weren't just flukes. He believed synchronicities reveal something deeper about how the psyche and the universe are mysteriously connected, that the inner world and the outer world might not be so separate after all, that sometimes life speaks in symbols instead of sentences, and if you know how to listen, it might just tell you what you need to hear. Welcome to Mantis Library. This is where the mind meets mystery, where psychology isn't just a theory, but an adventure. Let's begin. So, what exactly is synchronicity? Well, to put it simply, it's those moments that feel too perfectly timed to be mere coincidence. Jung described it as a meaningful coincidence of two or more events, where something other than probability is involved. So this isn't about A causes B. This is about A and B showing up at the same time, in a way that feels oddly perfect, even though there's no logical reason for them to be connected. It's meaning, not mechanics, that ties it all together. Let's say you have to make a big decision, maybe about quitting your job or moving cities. Out of nowhere, a stranger on a train starts talking about how they left their soul-sucking job and moved across the country to start over. You didn't ask for that story, but there it is. And it hits different. It feels like the universe overheard your thoughts and decided to send an answer through the least expected channel. That's synchronicity. Now, how is that different from a plain old coincidence? Coincidences are neutral. They're just statistical quirks, like running into an old classmate while buying toothpaste. It's mildly interesting, but you forget about it 10 minutes later. A synchronicity, on the other hand, feels like it knows you. It's emotionally charged. It mirrors something happening inside you. That's what makes it powerful. It's not the event. It's the personal resonance that gives it meaning. Jung believed synchronicities weren't just about weird stuff happening. He saw them as cracks in the illusion that the inner world, your thoughts, emotions, unconscious material, and the outer world, your daily reality, are separate. In moments of synchronicity, those walls come down. Something buried deep inside you gets reflected out in the world. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's eerie, but it always feels like something more is going on. That something more is where Jung gets really interesting. He suggested that these moments often come from the unconscious, either your personal unconscious, the stuff you've repressed, ignored, or forgotten, or the collective unconscious, those timeless archetypes that all humans carry. So, if you're suddenly seeing owl imagery everywhere, Jung wouldn't just say, "Oh, neat coincidence." He'd ask, what does the owl symbolize in your psyche? What message is it trying to deliver? In fact, Jung believed that synchronicities often show up when you're on the edge of transformation. You're cracking open. Something old is dying, and something new is trying to be born. The unconscious gets loud in those moments. And instead of just whispering in dreams, it starts dropping clues into your waking life. These aren't just random breadcrumbs. They're signals meant to guide you, challenge you, even wake you up. Here's where things get even more interesting. Jung proposed there's a level of reality, a kind of in-between zone, where the mind and matter actually connect. He called this the psychoid realm, It's not quite physical. It's not quite psychological. It's both. And this is where synchronicities are born. It's like life becomes a mirror that reflects back not just your thoughts, but your deeper soul truths. This idea might sound a little woo-woo, but Jung didn't just pull it out of thin air. He actually collaborated with quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli to explore how these spooky, meaningful coincidences might line up with some of the weirdest findings in science. For example, quantum entanglement, where two particles can affect each other instantly, even across great distances, kind of echoes the way a thought in your head and an external event can seem mysteriously linked. Or the observer effect, where simply observing a particle can influence its behavior. Jung wondered, what if consciousness really does shape reality, at least sometimes? Of course, not everyone's convinced. Plenty of scientists say synchronicities are just the brain doing what it does best, looking for patterns. They call it apophenia, the tendency to find connections in random data, or confirmation bias, where you notice things that support your belief and ignore the rest. You think about butterflies, then start seeing butterflies everywhere, not because they suddenly multiplied, but because your brain's tuned in. But here's the thing Jung would say in response. Yes, the brain loves patterns, but that doesn't mean the patterns are meaningless. Just because something happens in your psyche doesn't mean it's not real. Jung's whole point was that subjective experience matters. If a moment feels significant, if it moves something in you, if it shifts the way you see yourself or your life, that's not nothing. That's the language of the soul. And there's a reason synchronicities often show up during times of crisis or deep questioning. When you're in pain, lost, uncertain, that's when the unconscious gets activated. That's when symbols start slipping through, and they come not just to comfort you, but to guide you. Jung said, "The psyche is not of today. Its ancestry goes back many millions of years. Individual consciousness is only the flower and fruit of a season, sprung from the perennial rhizome beneath the earth. Synchronicities are like roots breaking through the sidewalk. They remind you there's something ancient and vast underneath your personal story. So maybe the dream wasn't just a dream. Maybe the random comment from a stranger was actually timed perfectly. Maybe the song that played when you needed it most was more than just luck." Jung didn't think these moments were magical in the fairy tale sense. He thought they were natural, just part of how the psyche works when it's really alive and listening. Now let's talk about how to actually spot these strange moments. Jung believed that synchronicities show up in specific ways, and once you learn what to look for, they start appearing more often. It's like tuning into a frequency you didn't even know you had access to. One of the most common forms is something called thought-event mirroring. You dream about something, say, a lion, and the next day you walk by a shop window and there's a statue of a lion staring right back at you. Coincidence? Maybe. But if that moment gives you chills or connects to something you've been going through internally, Jung would say, pay attention. Then there's the precognitive kind, little hints about what's coming. You hear a song lyric about freedom, and a few days later, you finally quit that job that's been draining your soul. Or you watch a movie that feels random, but the theme lines up perfectly with the decision you'll face later that week. These moments often don't make sense until after the fact, but they feel charged, as if something deep within you already knew what was coming and just needed the outer world to confirm it. Sometimes it's not even about symbols or dreams, it's people. Ever had a stranger say exactly what you needed to hear, even though they had no idea what you were going through? These guide encounters are powerful. They might come in the form of a passing comment, a podcast you randomly click on, or a book you stumble across in a thrift store. And suddenly, you hear the one sentence that feels like it was written just for you. Jung called this the language of the soul. It doesn't speak in logic, it speaks in resonance. Another form that many people experience but often shrug off is symbolic repetition. This is when something keeps showing up again and again, like seeing 11:11 on clocks, or always noticing butterflies during moments of transformation. These repeating patterns might seem small, but their emotional impact matters. Jung said, "The psyche is not a product of the brain, but rather the creative and meaningful ordering of events." In other words, meaning is the message. If something keeps showing up and it stirs something in you, don't ignore it. Now, of course, this raises the question, how do you tell the difference between a real synchronicity and just random noise? It's a fair question, especially when we live in a world full of distractions. One way to check is to ask yourself, did it strike an emotional chord? Did it relate to something you've been deeply thinking about or struggling with? Did it repeat in different forms, like a dream, a conversation, and a symbol all pointing to the same theme? If the answer is yes, then it's probably not just coincidence. It's your inner world making contact with your outer world. Jung never said that every weird moment was a synchronicity, but he did say that meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. The point isn't to find meaning in everything, but to stay open to the things that feel full of meaning. That's your cue to dig deeper. Working with synchronicities isn't about forcing connections. It's more about building a relationship with your unconscious mind. And the first step is simple. Pay attention. Keep a synchronicity journal. Write down those odd moments, the ones that stick with you, even if you don't know why. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You might notice that certain types of signs show up when you're about to go through a change, or that you tend to get guidance through music, or numbers, or animals. Everyone's language is a little different. Jung recommended meditation and reflection as tools for spotting synchronicities more clearly. When your mind is constantly buzzing, you miss the subtle stuff. But when you slow down, when you make space, those little winks from the universe have a chance to break through. That's when synchronicities feel less like surprises and more like conversations, ongoing, mysterious, and deeply personal. Once you start noticing synchronicities, the next step is learning how to interpret them. This doesn't mean jumping to conclusions or reading too much into everything. It's more like asking gentle questions. Jung used a method called amplification, where you take the symbol and explore its meanings in myths, stories, and dreams. For example, if you keep seeing owls, you might look up what owls mean in different cultures. Wisdom, mystery, transition. Then you ask yourself, how does that connect to what I'm going through? Another tool Jung used was active imagination. This is where you sit with the image or the moment and literally have a dialogue with it in your mind. Let's say you keep seeing water everywhere, maybe in dreams, in movies, in conversations. You could sit down and ask, why are you showing up? What are you trying to tell me? It sounds strange, but it's a way of letting your unconscious speak without judging it or needing to be rational. Frequent synchronicities can also be a sign that something inside you is ready to be seen. Maybe an old wound you've been avoiding, or a dream you've buried. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So sometimes, synchronicities are like breadcrumbs, leading you back to something you forgot, or forward to something you're meant to grow into. That's the beauty of synchronicity. It's not trying to be loud or dramatic. It's subtle, quiet. It speaks in symbols and timing. It doesn't demand belief. It asks for attention. That's it. And when you give it that attention, when you slow down enough to notice, it can change the way you see everything. Life starts to feel more connected, more alive, less mechanical, more poetic. And no, this doesn't mean you should throw logic out the window and base your decisions entirely on signs from billboards or tarot cards. Jung would definitely not recommend that. He wasn't about replacing thinking with superstition. He was about balancing the rationale with the imaginal, integrating both head and heart. In his own words, we are caught in the illusion that the facts are the only truth, but facts can lie. Sometimes, meaning is the deeper truth. Jung believed the world was alive with symbols, and that meaning wasn't something we made up. It was something we discovered. Synchronicities are one way the universe speaks back. They remind us that even in the most ordinary moments, something extraordinary might be unfolding. You just have to look up, look around, and maybe, just maybe, be willing to believe that life has layers, some seen, some unseen. And when those layers line up just right, that's when the magic happens. And if you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, stay mindful, and never stop exploring. We'll see you again in the Mantis Library.